In this episode of Artist Tales, I'm joined by Sabes Sugunasabesan, a photographic and mixed media artist whose work traces the intersections of identity, memory, and the Sri Lankan Tamil diaspora. Having migrated to England over 40 years ago, Sabes draws deeply on personal history and the emotional legacy of conflict. Welcome, Sabes, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
Well, it's great having you. So tell us a bit about yourself and the work that you're doing.
Okay, I am Sabes Sugunasabesan. Now I call myself an artist, photographer. If I'm to go back, I am from Sri Lanka. Was born in Malaysia. I grew up in Sri Lanka from the age of 7. This background is relevant to the work that I do. So I grew up in Sri Lanka in the north, mainly a village and then a town. In Malaysia, my memories are about my father was a station master, so I um, uh, I I lived around railway stations, railway lines, rivers, and fields. And in Sri Lanka and Malaysia, my people were rural and town people. So that is my background, where I am from. And I came to England in 1974. That's over 50 years. Ever since I have lived here and have my family and everything here now. But memories are back in Sri Lanka as well as here.
It sounds like it's, very much two very different countries in many ways that you've
Yes,
where you grew up and where you've lived since the mid
yes, that's right.
70s. Yeah, so that must be, I guess, in some ways quite dramatic. And has that influenced the type of work that you do?
It does. It does. Initially, when I start only here, I started doing visual work, photography. I had a camera. I used to borrow my uncle's camera and play with it. But earnestly, I only started doing photography here. Before coming here, I had exposure to poetry and literature. And in Sri Lanka is a very political place, so there's a lot of discussions about politics and literature. So I had that influence as I was growing up. So coming here, this dispersal, migration, whatever you call it, had an influence. Initially, I did work around missing home, the home that I left behind. So homesick kind of work I did. And that was 1974. Later, over the years, from about 1983, the events that began to happen in Sri Lanka was about conflict, and that developed into a war. So I was affected by that. So I was my work in my work I was responding to that in small ways, worrying about it, and the later I'll talk. In 2009, the war ended. Since then, I have done some work, different pieces of work. They all sort of link together. It is about war, about land, about memory, in that kind of theme. So yes, my work is, in a way, it is about looking at what is happening in Sri Lanka from here, from my living room, because I was not there during the war times. I have no direct experience or connection with it, except seeing, hearing people's accounts, news and YouTube, Facebook messages. So that's how I inform myself about the war. And also, there is a big diaspora in this country, so seeing their anxieties and anguish. So these are the sources of my work. So in a way, that what was happening in Sri Lanka has become my window of looking at other places, conflict in other places, and reflecting my response to that being from I am here in a comfortable place. So looking at the contrast, thinking about, also thinking about why I worry about people who are far away from me. So that made me that made me think about, can we be concerned about people who are not us, who are others? So those kind of concerns, those sort of considerations came to surface to think about in my work. If I can, would it be useful if I talk about the projects that I have been doing?
I was going to ask you about the projects. Yes, so please do.
Yes. Okay. So my first project reflecting on the war was called the Ode to Sri Lanka. The Ode to Sri Lanka I did it in 2010. It is a metaphor using flowers as metaphor for people in the country. Then Ode is as a young person influenced by visionary leaders at that time. We had great hopes for the country, a united country, an equal country, a socialist country, that kind of visions that I grew up with. And 2010, when I did this work, it is the collapse of all those hopes. People are divided, people are isolated from one another, communities are polarized through political propagandas, the war, manipulation of the politicians. So that was one work. So Ode to Sri Lanka, it's a book. Later, the war ended in 2009, so I did that in 2010. And around 2012, I did another piece of work reflecting on my experience of looking at the war from the distance. So I did it under the theme of home, thinking about what is home. What is home for me? What is home for people who are caught up in the conflict, in the war? What is home for people who are running away from bombings and shellings? So I used Google Maps of the beach, Google Map image of the beach before and after the end of the war in northern Sri Lanka. In that image, you're seeing tents that people put up in the beach with the hope of escaping from the war and with the hope of being rescued. And they died in that beach as well. So that was an installation. Within the insert, there is an image of my living room in this big Google Map image. There is an insert of my living room. Within that, there is a TV, and within that is on the TV is the collage of the map where people are stranded. So that was that work. So that along with that, there is a poem also. So I use photography and poem and found images and collages and text within it as well. And later, 2016, after 7 years after the end of the war, 7 years after the end of the war, I went to Sri Lanka to see, in a way, to find out what happened face to face, to be there, to see the places, to talk to people. So the trip was not a photography trip, but more of a trip for me to make connections, to connect with the event that happened 7 years ago, and also connect with people there. So 2016, I visited, but I did some photographs. And 2018, I showed it as a work called Last Walk to the Beach, reflecting on the direction of the war, direction of people's escape from the war to the beach called Mullivakal Beach. Earlier, I used that on the Google map with a Google map image. So that was in 2018. And then the same year, after going to Sri Lanka, I went on a tour with 4 other people to Southwest USA, covering states like New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, almost the corner of the 4 states. The land that we drove through in our SUV was the Native American lands, mostly Navajo land. And that trip, it was organized as an art photography trip. That trip, as soon as I landed there, being there, I began to wonder. It started bothering me as to why I am here. It was an unease. And I did not know, by that time, I have not read much about Native American history. And here I am. Later I read, and I felt, I did a project. After coming back, I did a project reflecting on my unease about it. So the work was called Cruise America. And it is about my tourism, about tourist gaze. As tourists, we go to places not knowing as to what happened in that land, what happened to the people of that land. But we go there to enjoy the landscape and take photographs and so on. So it was a critique of myself in that land. So it was Cruise America, which I showed in 2022. At the time, I did a contemporary art course at CityLit. And doing that course was useful to think about photography beyond the traditional photography. That's when I felt I can make collages, I can cut it, I can draw over it, I can write over it. That came in the same year as going to Sri Lanka. In that way, there is some connection, I guess. And then I belong to a group called Hertfordshire Photo Forum, a group of photographers. We meet in St. Albans. So we did a group project to be presented at the St. Albans Museum. And the title of the theme of the group exhibition was Invisible Threads. So in every work I do quite a bit of research because I cannot decide quickly what to do. It takes time for me. So I had to do research, I had to find out, I had to read. So I came upon this idea of looking at Saint Alban and his story and his connection to St. Albans. Saint Alban was, before he became a saint, he was Alban. He was alive during the Roman period, nearly the end of Roman period in St. Albans. And he protected a Christian priest called Amphibolus. And for that, he was beheaded, and Amphibolus was also beheaded. So it became a symbol of refuge, giving refuge to other people and sacrificing his life for that, and his dedication and freedom of speech. All that was stirred up in my mind about the work. So then I dip deep into the history of St. Albans, and there were lots of political maneuverings, abbots of the St. Albans Church confiscating the fishing area and flooding the place because there was a trade competition. So all these things, all these intrigues attracted me. So I did that work. So it became Invisible Threads of St. Albans. And then again, I did some work around view from living room. I did a small series about what do we see from our living room. these wars, and it is surrounded by the comfort of our living room in the West. And the recent project called Kungumam, which I showed in Harrow, April, May last year, and at the Quaker Friends House in Westminster, December, January, and on Sunday, 1st of February, I closed it. It is about, again, going back to the beach in Sri Lanka. I went there 2024, and I was reflecting, this time I was reflecting on the losses the whole country suffered during the 3 decades of war, 83 to 2009. There were 90,000 Tamil women widowed in that period. We don't have a count of military losses. Governments don't release those figures. So 30-year war means there would have been substantial losses in the Sinhala South, where mostly military came from. And also during that period, we had a uprising called the JVP uprising, People Liberation Front uprising from 1988 to 1990. That's about 60,000 deaths. So I'm beginning to think about all the losses, all these numbers, and began to think that this period, that 3 decades, the country lost thousands of people. So the project Kungumam is a reflection on that, and remembrance of those losses, and remembrance of what war took away from us. And using the Kungumam is a red powder that Tamil women wear, married Tamil women wear, as a dot on their forehead. And when their husbands die, they stop wearing it. So that became a symbol for me. That red powder became a metaphor for all these losses. So I did a performance in the beach, in the same beach I'm talking about, Mullivaikal Beach, with the powder, dissolving the powder on the water. And I photographed the the marks that the white powder left on the beach. And it created some abstracts, markings. And I showed that as well as other photographs I took during that time. The project worked well. It has become, I'm using it as a catalyst, a piece for conversation about losses amongst Tamils and among Sinhalese, among Muslims also, for all losses. The question I'm raising is that what it means for us to acknowledge our own loss and what it means for us to acknowledge other people's losses. Those two questions seem simple, but they are both difficult. We have difficulty acknowledging our own losses for many reasons. And when we cannot do that, we cannot also acknowledge other people's losses. Without these two happening, a ground for understanding each other, ground for empathy cannot come to place. So that is the question that's coming out of that project. So I'm thinking of it as a touring conversation. So that is the latest and current project. Quite a bit of work to do in taking this conversation forward.
And I've seen that project, the most recent that you've mentioned, the Kukunkumen, and I have to say it's quite a powerful exhibition. And, there are quite a few themes that you've touched on, but I'll start from the latest one you were talking about. The thing that really came to mind was grief.
Yes.
When there is conflict, when there's death, and you're talking about, any death, but when you get into thousands and hundreds of thousands, it's almost unfathomable that level of death and destruction. And, in terms of not only human life, but also the environment and that, and animal life and ecosystems and things.
Yeah.
And, I was struck by what you said about having that conversation about, well, how do you have that conversation to grieve personally, but also to grieve for others,
Yeah.
and particularly across that, perhaps the divide, for lack
Yeah.
of better phrase, of the people on the other side that were the
Yeah.
other.
Yes, that's not an easy one. I know by showing to Tamil people, mainly when Tamil young people came here, came to see the exhibition from the diaspora, they say, we don't know about it. My parents don't tell us. These parents, many of the parents would have left the country as a result of the troubles of the 3 decades. Yet the children say this. So we see people don't tell amongst themselves. They don't talk among themselves as a self-preservation, as a responsibility for the children because they don't want to traumatize their children. But young people are curious. They look at Gaza, they look at other wars, and they were wondering, oh, we were also affected by war. So what was that? What is that detail? So that is the difficulty amongst the community itself, with the Tamil community itself. And people in Sri Lanka did not get as much information as people outside got during the war. There's a Channel 4 documentary that came out, but it was banned inside the country. Information within the country that went to the wider public was about how well the army is doing against these terrorists. And on the Tamil side, Tamils were getting what the group called LTTE, Tamil Tigers. They were broadcasting, and Tamil people were receiving information broadcasted by Tamil Tigers. So nobody were getting balanced information of the development of the war or casualties equally on both sides. So there is no common understanding of the war. And the causes of the war came about because of inequalities, lack of historic education. In history, both communities have a common heritage and common ancestors as well. But that sort of information is not part of the general curriculum. So we think they are different. Tamils think Sinhalese are different. Sinhalese thinks Tamils are different. So there's no grounds. So your question is, how do we create this conversation? This is the reason we had to create a conversation. And I think my contribution is a small contribution to raise this awareness, this possibility, and this need. There is something that I started thinking about after seeing an article by an anthropologist called Pradeep Jagannathan, written some time back. In that, he develops this theory about violence. His formulation is that conditions of possibilities of violence. So there are conditions of possibilities for violence to erupt. That is in education, in what politicians speak, what newspaper talks cover. So using that, I thought, what are the conditions for the possibilities of peace? So in this project, I'm saying, as a result of the project, I'm beginning to think that if communities can acknowledge both their losses, their own other people's losses, there is room for empathy with one another. And if education can open up give the understanding of common heritage, then that is a grounds. That's not everything, but at least that is the two, which can be done by artists, academics, ordinary people, civic society. Up to now, we have left everything to the politicians and the state to do these things, and they don't have the imagination or interest to do that. So that is my contribution. It is not an easy task because it is only in the political space these are the conflict, I call it conflict, is talked about. And it is polarized. Although we have a new government which doesn't stir ethnic hatred, but it, it, it threads very carefully because it can upset the majority Sinhalese, or it can activate Sinhala nationalist politicians. So the government has to tread very, very carefully. On the Tamil side, mainly Tamil politicians have to talk about uh, how they cannot give up national liberation type of discourses. So communities are politicized and in that sense polarized. So how do you create this conversation? I'm testing this out also. I'm saying the losses are losses, not the loss of a soldier, not the loss of a LTT fighter, freedom fighter, not a loss of a member of an ethnic community, but loss of a human being. A mother or a wife has lost her son or husband. If we can think like that, so we are thinking of these losses, of the deaths, free from the ideological links these losses had. Idea of the state or majority state or idea of Tamil liberation. Not that they are unimportant, but for a moment, if we can think of these as human losses, that may shift our mindset, make us think about others. I inquired about what happened if any projects happened in bringing these families together. So I was told that there was one short project where Tamil families who lost their beloved were introduced, taken to, and they lived in Sinhala families who lost their members in the war. And the Sinhala families also came and stayed in Tamil families. And I spoke to one person who was involved in that project from the Tamil side. She said to me that before going to stay with them, they had all these fears that our terrorists have killed their son or husband, how they would receive us. But when they were introduced, when they met, they interacted at a human level, not in the level of Tamils or Sinhalese, enemy or friend. So, but it was a short project. So I think it is possible by opening, leaving aside ideas and politics, and opening the possibility that these are human beings we are talking about, we are dealing with, and it is possible. And also, there is trauma on both sides. That is, trauma is valid, and it has to be harnessed or nurtured. But there's also a question: what do we do with trauma or loss? If we are to think of the future, then we have to think about the losses as something to build on as well. So it is these kinds of thinking that I am trying to think through, also think with other people. And I had, so as a result, during the exhibition, I had several conversations, both when I showed it in Harrow and also at a Quaker meeting house. I had lots of conversations with people who came, and there were organized conversations as well. I had a conversation with Mal, with an invited audience, and Mal Woolford and I, we mentor each other, we support each other's work. So we have a lot of conversations outside this. So I had a conversation about this with Mal, and audience joined in. I did a workshop with another young person, a young diaspora Tamil, who is interested in how Tamils navigate spaces in this country. So I had a conversation. We had two workshops. They were creative workshops to help people to talk about these issues and interrogate the photographs as well. So my idea is to do it more with other people.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it sounds quite powerful as well. And it's not
Yeah,
the thing that I'm really getting out of speaking to other, to you and other artists is the power of dialogue, the power of art to help with that dialogue.
Yes,
And like, the topics, and it can be very difficult topics like yours in terms of,
yeah,
processing grief, processing trauma, through to, the environment, how we treat the environment and that sort of thing, and other things as well. But
yes,
it's that kind of, I don't know, finding, as we mentioned earlier, finding that common thread or finding that invisible thread. You know,
yes,
we're human, aren't we?
exactly. I think all artists, what we are doing, whatever we do, in one sense, it is for pleasure. It is to keep our minds healthy. But it's also about repairing traumas, or thinking about damaged environment. So we don't want it to continue to be damaged. So it's all way of repairing and preserving it, preserving memories, preserving land. That's I think that's what art is doing. And art is also a very useful medium in terms of introducing the difficult questions. It works. It's not manipulation, but subtly you put forward possibilities. You don't have to spell out everything, and people come with questions or suggestions and commentary based on what is shown. In my work, I show cotton reel, which was found in near Mullivakal beach. And that in that cotton reel, there is a needle that has rusted and look red. And the broken threads of the cotton cotton reel is sort of looks like it is flying. So somebody said yesterday on Sunday that it is a very violent looking image. It could be, we can't see it has been used to repair somebody's clothes, but it also looks like exploding bomb caught in a split second. So with that just one image, the person sees repairs and sees violence. And when I showed Kungumam, when the Kungumam is also it's also done. My performance is done as a video as well, shown as a video. In that, people were seeing their memories, they see blood as well, but also they see the cultural elements that are used to preserve and used as a reminder. All kinds of things people can get to read through artwork. Not everything is intended by the artist. And we are
No,
simply responding to some things, and the people will respond.
that is so true. Sorry to talk over you, but that's so true
Yes,
that
yes,
you're not alone in saying that. I've had, myself showing my photography, but also
yeah,
other people showing artwork saying once it's out there, it kind of takes a life of its own and people see things, as you
exactly.
say, that perhaps
Yeah,
you didn't see or think of or
yeah,
occur
yeah,
to you.
yeah. It gives us, art really gives us a nice way into people's minds and hearts and brain. If you write an article, you had to sort out everything. You had to do your research, you had to have your argument, you had to have good conclusions. With art, you don't have to do it. You can just open up. You can have some ambitions and intentions of unity, intentions of love, intentions of understanding. But as you have to do in an academic essay, you don't have to do it in art. You just create this environment and possibility on the pages or in the artwork. People will see it. And then if you can continue with conversations, create some opportunities, create collaboration with others, it can go a bit further.
I agree with that. The last question I have is what's next? Where do you think your work is taking you? Or where would you like to see it? Or if you have a plan, where would you like to see it
Yeah.
go?
This work itself, Kungumam, in a way, in a way, it's not a separate project. It's one point of a continuous theme that I deal with. And it has really worked well. I think for me, I feel very good about it. So that itself has some things to be done. It has to be a book with some writing. Some people said it has a possibility of an educational book on peace, that kind of stuff. And I want to have more conversations and more workshops linked to this and see who can come in my way to collaborate. So that is in relation to this work. So it has some work to do, or a lot of work to do in this, arising from the work. But I have talked in Sri Lanka and I talked in Toronto as well. More of that can be done. I like to do more of the conversation in Sri Lanka in the south. That is one in relation to this work. There's another project I had in mind for some time. It's about a beauty queen from one part of the south of Sri Lanka who was killed by the army in 1971, suspected of being a terrorist of the JVP uprising. I said People Liberation Front uprising in 1971. There were two uprisings by JVP, one in 71 and one in 88, 90. So she was killed, and have been thinking about that. I was in Sri Lanka at that time, and it was a brutal killing. And thinking of the beauty queen and the country, which is portrayed as a beautiful country, pearl of the Indian Ocean. It is a place of tourist attraction. It is naturally a beautiful country, but the country is full of violence. From 1948 to 2009, we had all kinds of violence, political, parliamentary violence in the sense a removal of the citizenship of hill country Tamils, for example. That's a violent act. Overnight, they removed that. Later, there were killings of protesters. Then lots of political killings, pogroms against Tamils. So I'm thinking of this beauty and the violence. Violence is perpetrated on this beauty queen. Similarly, the violence is perpetrated on the country. It is a project I've been thinking for some time. So hopefully I will make some progress on that work.
I hope so too.
Yes, yes. Yeah, apart from that, all this, I think, joining, I told you I only started visual work after coming here. Before that, I have written poems and interested in other people's poetry and short stories and so on. Coming here around the formation, I was around the formation of London Independent Photography. It's a group of like-minded photographers. Its basic ethos is to use about encouraging use of photography as a self-expression. I remember at the beginning itself, Paul Hill and Virginia Curry and the founders said about London Independent Photography's purpose is not for competition, not to lay the rule about what is a good photograph, but to encourage people to express themselves through photography. And that association has helped me a lot. So right from the start, I've been concerned about how do I express emotions through photography. So the book I mentioned earlier, The Ode to Sri Lanka, is my emotions, my grief about country losing its ways, that expressed through through flowers. So that kind of focus that Lip gave me has been very, very useful. It is
Yeah.
really Yeah, sometimes frustrating because you don't understand. You come from a background where everything is defined, and where here, so they say, you express yourself. So, what is my feeling? How do I express it? So, you are forced to think about all these things.
Yeah,
But encouragement was always to do something, do it. Don't worry too much, just do it. And then you think, I found that doing first and then thinking about it has been a very useful process. So creativity cannot be planned or should not be planned, but I think if you have some things that irritate you, something inspires you, something agitates you. So if you have a vision to have all that in your mind and create something, and something will come.
indeed. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we'll have to come to a close. I'm sure we
Okay.
could probably speak for hours. So you're incredibly interesting, Sabes, and I really want to thank you for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for having me. And it is a right moment for me to do this podcast with you because I've just finished the exhibition of Kungumam. Before I do another iteration of it to do this talk, it's been very useful. Very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. And good luck with your future podcasts.
Thank you. And good luck with your future projects.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning into my conversation with Sabes. His work reflects communities affected by conflict and also allows space to explore its impact and enables dialogue. More information about Sabes is in the show notes. In the next episode, I have a conversation with Tinsel Edwards. She's a painter and multidiscipline maker who draws on lived experience from motherhood to the everyday pressures of domestic life. You won't want to miss it.